Welcome! Thank you for joining us for today's lesson. This is part of a 6-lesson series brought to you by the Food Trust Nutrition Educators. The Food Trust works to ensure that everyone has access to affordable, nutritious food and the information to make healthy choices. In this series, we'll be covering topics such as planning and saving on groceries, fruits and vegetables, bone strength, and more. Join us each week as we share nutrition information from My Plate, as well as tips and tricks to eating more healthy food at every meal. Meet our nutrition educators, who you'll get to know through our lessons or recipe demonstrations. We're excited to have you with us. Again for joining us. Please fill out our anonymous survey at the end of this video so that we can find out more about who we're reaching and how to serve our audience best. Mention that you watched our lesson online and you can earn food coupons to use when purchasing fruits and vegetables at a participating farmers market. Find the list of participating markets below on the survey form. We hope you come back for next week's lesson. See you then!
Hey everyone, welcome back this week. For those that are new or for those that don't remember me, my name is Alex and I'm an adult SNAP Ed educator with the Food Trust of Philadelphia. It's so nice to have you guys here. And this week we're going to be talking all about some things you don't find on the My Plate: fat, sugar, and salt. But first, let's flash back to the last couple of weeks so we can review what we learned.
And this is my meal: pumpkin pancakes. Now, before I put together my list, like I said earlier, you always want to check, make sure, because you may have some of these ingredients already in your house. And that will save you a lot of time, trouble, and money. So when you think about putting a meal together, think about what you already have.
So for veggies, we need about 3 cups per day. And for fruits, we need 2, right? The reason is because fruits are high in sugar, so we just want to watch how much we have. Although you're getting more than that and you're getting, your daily value, that's really good. So to recap, 3 cups of vegetables, 2 cups of fruit for adults, right? For kids, it'll be slightly less.
The first way to determine whether the product contains whole grain is by looking at the ingredient list. This will let us know if a product is 100% whole grain or a combination of whole grains and refined. Here we see that the first ingredient is whole grain wheat. That means that this product is, in fact, whole grain.
If you're going down the milk aisle and you see all those types of milk that Eddie was talking about, which ones do you think is going to be the best choice for you? We have our whole milk, which has the full fat, and then we have our non-fat or low-fat milk. So with our dairy food, we want to choose, again, the low-fat or non-fat milk options. Pick up the fat-free milk and the whole milk and compare those labels. They're going to have the same amount of calcium, but the different thing is going to be the amount of fat that's in them.
Animal-based protein and plant-based protein both have their pros and cons. They're both great for us in terms of building our protein goals. So if you eat both, make sure you eat a diet of both. But if you eat plant-based, know that you'll still reach your protein goals as well. You want to make sure you're eating your beans, nuts, and seeds. And if you eat meat, chicken, turkey, and fish are the better options.
So a huge shout out to Wayne, Eddie, Jen, Paulette, and Charlize for all of the great information they've given us the last 5 weeks. It's been incredible. And today we're talking all about some things you don't find on the My Plate: fat, sugar, and salt. Now, what do you think about when I say fat, sugar, and salt? So a lot of times we hear these are the things that maybe we don't want so much of, and they're also the things we don't find on our My Plate. So we like to say these are some sometimes things, and we'll talk about all of that. So today we're talking about ways we can limit foods high in fat, sugar, and salt. And you know, realistically, sometimes that's hard to do. So when you think about these things and you think about what foods have this stuff in it, what do you think about? So a lot of people think about fast food. Fast food tends to be high in fat and salt, you know, and that thing you get with the fast food, soda or soft drinks or teas or stuff like that, they tend to be high in sugar. There's also that thing we find on Halloween. Yeah, that's candy. Candy's also high in sugar. And even some of these products we eat every day sometimes just have a lot of fat, sugar, and salt in them. Now, when I talk about fat, sugar, and salt, they're not always a bad thing. In fact, our body needs some of these things most of the time, right? But when we get too much of it, that's when it can become an issue. So today we're gonna be talking about what happens when we get too much of it and how we can stop ourselves from getting too much of it. So the first thing we're gonna talk about is fats, right? And when I say the word fats, a lot of people think, oh, that's bad, I don't want that, right? But that's actually not true, right? There's good fats and there's bad fats. So cutting all fat out, not a good idea. We just wanna make sure we're getting the right ones. So we're gonna talk about 4 different types of fats, right? So monounsaturated fats, polyunsaturated fats, saturated fats, and trans fats. And these are different because they have different chemical structures and our body processes them differently, right? So it's important to remember that some of these fats are healthier than other ones, and those are the ones we want in our body. So when we look at fats, we're gonna break them into 2 groups. We're gonna call them the good fats and the bad fats. Now those monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats, the unsaturated fats, those are gonna be our good fats. And then we have our saturated fats and our trans fats, which are gonna be our less good fats or our bad fats, right? So here's a great example of 2 different types of fats, right? And it'll show you why maybe we want the unsaturated more than the saturated, right? So in my right hand, we have olive oil, right? So olive oil is an unsaturated fat. And if you look, I'm swirling it around, right? Because it's a liquid. Now, if I think about it, if I put a liquid in my body, what happens to it? Well, it moves through my body pretty easily. My body doesn't have to put that much energy into breaking it down too much, and it just moves freely through my body, right? So it's gonna get stuck less places, right? Now in my right hand, I have butter, right? And this is, what is this? If I drop this, if I pour it, it's a solid, right? It doesn't spill everywhere. So solid butter is a great sign of saturated fats, right? So saturated fats tend to be solid at room temperature when unsaturated fats are liquid at room temperature. Now, why might a saturated fat be worse for me than an unsaturated fat? Well, if it's a solid at room temperature, it means when it's in my body, it's probably a solid, which means my body needs to put more effort into breaking it down, and it also might get stuck places I don't want it to get stuck, like my heart. So those are the main differences that we can see. We can literally see the difference between most of our unsaturated and our saturated fats. So we want those liquids. Now we got that third fat coming in, trans fat. So trans fat is found in a lot of our candies and our fast food and stuff like that. So trans fat actually is a fat our body can't break down. So can you imagine putting something in your body that you can't break down? No. So we actually want to avoid as much trans fat as possible. We can have some saturated fats. Our body can put the work in and get that done, right? And we prefer to have unsaturated fats because it's easier for our body. But those trans fats, they go nowhere, right? You know, so we don't necessarily want as many of those or any of them in our diet. So why don't we want too many of these saturated or trans fats in our diet? What can happen? Well, one of the biggest things it can do is it can raise our cholesterol, which is our blood fat, and it puts us at risk for heart disease. Right? We want our heart working nice and clean, and working fine, and we can't risk heart disease by putting too many of these saturated fats in it, right? So you always want to check the nutrition facts label for saturated and trans fats. Now let's see what happens, right? So say we get, I got this handy dandy artery model, right? So arteries and veins are what, in our vascular system, is what our heart uses to get blood throughout our body. So let's look at this model, right? So we have two different sides. One side, we're gonna say this side is a body that gets a good amount of insoluble or soluble fiber, right? Stays nice and clean, and is a pretty healthy person that maybe has some saturated fats, but gets enough fiber to make sure their heart stays nice and clean. And now this side is a body that maybe eats a lot of extra saturated or trans fats, right? And doesn't get the amount of fiber they need. So when I look at this model, which blood, these little blood droplets, do you think is gonna move faster and move freely? The left or the right? Well, I think it's pretty clear when I flip it upside down. Let's watch. That this side, the clear side, is just moving so much easier. And this side, it looks like you're trying to suck water through a pinched straw. And that's not good, because our blood carries our oxygen to our body, and we need oxygen to live. So you want to make sure you're staying nice and healthy and eating less saturated fats and more soluble fiber. Now, does this happen overnight? Absolutely not. This is years and years and years, right? So if you have fast food, maybe once or twice, you know, this isn't happening, right? This is from kind of neglecting our body over time and getting too many saturated fats and not exercising enough and not getting enough soluble fiber, right? So we want to make sure our veins and arteries look more like this and less like this pinched straw. So the next thing I want to show you is maybe some fat that we find in our common foods. So we always talk about fast food and maybe how it's not the best for us, but sometimes it's what we get. You know, I occasionally have fast food, but we want to make sure it's occasionally, because when you look at the amount of fat in a cheeseburger, it's insane. So these 3 tubes right here represent the amount of fat found in one fast food cheeseburger. So that's 2 tablespoons per tube. So that's 6 tablespoons. Do you know how much that is? That's actually 3/4 of a stick of butter. That's more butter than I have in this bowl right now. So that would be like taking a fork and just like housing in this butter and just eating it, right? Actually, it would be taking the fork, eating these 4 cubes, and then eating 2 more. So that's why we want to avoid eating fast food or things like that regularly. Like, we don't want them all the time, because it just adds so much extra fat to our diet. And like I said, that extra fat is going to lead to potentials for heart disease. It actually puts you at higher risk for diabetes, and even it puts you at risk for some different types of cancer. So we just want to make sure we're getting less saturated fat, more unsaturated fats. And how can we do that? What are some great ideas for cutting back some fat? So some of the places we find a lot of fat in our diet is fats used in cooking. It's in our butters, our mayonnaises, our condiments, our dressings, cheese, right? If we don't get low fat cheese like they talked about 2 weeks ago, we want to get some low fat cheese. It's even in our red meats, our whole milks, our cakes, our pies, all of that stuff. So all of the stuff that sounds pretty good, right? And that's why we call them sometimes foods. They aren't on my plate because we don't want to have them all the time. We want them as treats, we want them as desserts, right? So make sure they happen sometimes in our diets. And for things like dressing or condiments that you use every day, look for low fat or no fat options. That's one of the easiest ways to cut back. Also when cooking, instead of maybe putting some butter in the pan, try some olive oil. It might make the difference. And another thing, maybe when you do have those less healthy options, try not to get larges or supersize them. You know, maybe get a small or a medium or something like that. Maybe go for the grilled option instead of the fried option. So frying food is just another way of adding fat, right? You're literally dropping it in fat and frying it with fat, which adds fat to it. So maybe try the grilled option instead of the fried one. Also, substitute, right? Maybe if you're eating a less healthy thing, instead of getting the fries, get a side salad or something like that. Another thing is when you get those salads or stuff from fast food restaurants, a lot of times they put the dressing on. Get it on the side and add it yourself. It's another way just to cut back a little bit. And those little differences help. So the next thing we're going to talk about is sugar and what effect that has on your body. So excessive amounts of sugar in our food and beverages can lead to teeth decay, right? Cavities and stuff like that, which affects our whole digestive system. If we can't chew our food properly, our body doesn't process it properly. So we don't want too much sugar because it hurts our teeth, but also it's one of the leading causes to diabetes, right? In fact, the American Heart Association says we shouldn't get more than 30 grams of added sugar a day. So I don't know if you know what a gram of sugar looks like, but I don't necessarily know what a gram of sugar looks like. So every 4 grams of sugar is a teaspoon, right? So that's what? 7 teaspoons of extra sugar every day. So we want to make sure we're not getting too much of that added sugar, because our body isn't ready to process added sugar. It is ready to process our natural sugars. So we'll talk about that in a second. So the number 1 place for added sugar in our diet is our beverages, right? Not everybody's out here drinking water or seltzer. We're drinking sweet things, you know? We're even drinking things like milk and juice, which have natural sugars in them. And we're also drinking things with added sugar, like soda and stuff. So here I have 4 mainly unmarked bottles of beverages that we're gonna talk about, and we're gonna measure the sugar out, right? I have unmarked Post-it milk. I have unbranded chocolate milk. I have juice beverage, we'll talk about that. And I have blue cap soda, right? And we're gonna talk about the different amounts of sugars. So like I said earlier, every 4 grams of sugar is 1 teaspoon. So I kind of think it's intentional. They put the sugar in grams on our nutrition facts label, right? I don't know what a gram looks like on the daily, but I do know what a teaspoon looks like, right? So here is a teaspoon. It's about the size of the top of your pinky. So 4 grams is 1 top of pinky of sugar, right? So now we're gonna measure out a couple of different things. The first thing we're gonna talk about is the difference in our milks, right? So I have regular fat-free milk, and I have chocolate milk here. So which one do you think has more sugar in it? The regular milk or the chocolate milk? So flavored milks do tend to have more sugar, right? And just about how much, right? This regular milk has 12 grams of sugar per serving, right? And there's 2 servings in this bottle. I don't know about you, but when I have a bottle of something, I tend to drink the whole thing. So we're gonna count out all of the sugar in milk. So this is 12 grams per serving, 2 servings. That gives us 24 grams, which is about 6 teaspoons, right? So let's measure that out. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Keep me honest, right? I'm gonna put honest teaspoons in here. So about that much sugar just comes from drinking this bottle of milk, right? It's crazy to think about, like, I wouldn't eat this with a spoon, but I will say our body's ready for this sugar, right? Because this sugar is lactose sugar, and we have lactase enzymes in our body that are ready to process this sugar. So we have about 6 teaspoons there, and in this bottle we have 2 servings per container, and there's 25 grams per serving. So that's 50 grams of sugar, which is about twice that of regular milk, right? So 1, 2, 3, we got a lot of sugar to measure out. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So it's twice the amount of sugar, right? Now, would you eat these sugars with a spoon? Probably not. But it's dissolved in our beverage, so it's really easy. And if we look at the difference between flavored and regular milk, right? Our flavored milk has twice as much sugar. So if we know that 12 grams or 24 per bottle is the lactose sugar, it means that that extra 24 grams, 25 grams is added sugar, which is not so great for our diet. We just said that we only want 30 grams of added sugar, additional sugar per day, right? So that's all of our added sugar for the day, just by drinking that 1 bottle of flavored milk. So I suggest maybe keep this as a sometimes treat and drink more regular milk, right? So we have these 2 here. We're gonna leave them there because visuals are great, right? The next thing we're gonna talk about is juice beverage. Make sure everything's covered up. Juice beverage, right? So why do I call this juice beverage and not juice? So in week 2, we learned a little bit from Eddie about juice and wanting 100% juice. So when I say 100% juice, what do you think I mean? You're right. I mean that it's made with 100% fruit, right? right? So that's like taking an orange, squeezing the juice and drinking that. That's 100% fruit juice, right? And that 100% fruit juice has 100% of those natural sugars that 100% of our body is 100% looking forward to, right? So we want to make sure we're getting 100% juice. If it's not 100% juice, we can't guarantee that all of the sugars are natural sugars. Some of them, and most of the time, are added sugars. And we don't necessarily, like we said before, we don't want all of that added sugar in our diet. So this juice is 25%, it says made with real fruit juice, but it's 25% juice. It's actually not 100% juice. And there's 57 grams of sugar per bottle, right? So let's look at this. I'm gonna use a cheat code. A cheat code I have to make this a little easier is that 3 teaspoons is 1 tablespoon. So we're gonna do some quick math, right? And we said 4 grams per teaspoon, so that gives us, oh, I'm gonna use my cheat sheet down here, 14 teaspoons, which is what? You know, like 5 of these guys. We got 5 tablespoons, right? So cheat code coming through. I don't even know if I can do this right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that amount of sugar is in our juice, right? And this is, like I said, our fake juice, our 25% juice, but it's in our juice. So we don't actually know how much of this is natural sugar and how much of this added sugar because it is 25% juice and not 100% juice. So we have this much juice. And again, back to what I said before, would we eat this with a spoon? Probably not. It's a lot easier to drink than it is to eat, right? This added sugar. So we want to make sure we're getting that 100% juice instead of this 25% juice. And also we just want to make sure we're only getting 1 serving of juice a day. If we get too much juice in our diet, we're missing out on fiber. Because when you juice something, you're literally throwing the fiber away. So make sure you're getting 1 serving of juice. If you're using that as a serving of fruit, only get 1 a day and make sure it's 100% juice. Because this has just as much as our chocolate milk. Actually, a little more than our chocolate milk. Crazy to think about. So this is gonna sit here and we're going to my favorite beverage, Blue Cap soda, right? And Blue Cap soda has 70 grams, well 69, but 70 grams of sugar per serving, which breaks down to 17 teaspoons. So we have 15 here. We are gonna cheat and we're gonna add a couple, right? So 1, 2, oh wait, and a quarter. There we go. So that's all of the sugar in this bottle of soda. Again, would we eat this? Probably not, but it's so easy to drink. And they make it so easy to drink.
Pardon this interruption for an important message. So some of you may be thinking right now, well, I don't drink the Blue Cap soda. I drink the Red Cap soda or the Orange Cap soda, or I drink the Green Cap soda that says made with raw cane sugar. So maybe this doesn't apply to me. Sorry to say, all the sugar in these sodas is the same and has the same effect on your body if you overconsume that soda on a regular basis. So take this opportunity to think about your beverages and how much of them you're drinking before you open that next can of soda. Now, back to your regularly scheduled program.
So that's what I'm trying to say is sugar in our beverages is so easy to consume. We just have to be mindful about what we're drinking. It's so easy to drink, so let's just maybe take a second and think about what we're drinking the next time we drink it. And take a look at this label, because we don't just want to blindly drink 18, 17 teaspoons of sugar. That's no fun. So I took a sec to refill that one because visuals are important and I want you guys to see all the sugar that's in front of us. But let's talk about how we limit this amount of sugar. What are some ways you can cut back sugar in your diet? You can cut back your beverages, absolutely. Like I said, beverages are the highest place we find sugar in our diet. But other things we can do is maybe cut back on the candy and cakes and treats and pies, and we keep those and use them as desserts, right? Desserts and treats and sometimes foods, right? Things we don't eat every day, things we eat some days. You know, what are some other places we find it? We find it in things like ice cream and sherbets and sweetened yogurts and flavored things like this flavored milk and flavored yogurts. So maybe we cut back on those and we get plain, plain milk and we get plain yogurt and we add our own fruit to them or something like that. Another thing is just cutting back on the amount of sugar you use in your cooking. I know sometimes when we bake, you know, the recipe calls for this much of this sugar and this much of that sugar. So maybe we cut back on some of that sugars, or we use more natural sweeteners or something like that. That's a great way to kind of cut back. In fact, in most recipes, you can cut back the sugar by a third, like 1/3 of the amount of sugar, and it won't even affect the chemistry in the baking. It won't even affect the amount of, affect how the product comes out. So just keep that in mind. So next time you make cookies, maybe, if it calls for a cup of sugar, maybe only put 2/3 a cup of sugar in. You know, save a little bit of sweetness there. So the last group we're gonna talk about is the third piece of that triple threat, and that's salt. So we covered fat, sugar, and the last one is salt. And salt's a doozy because salt can lead to high blood pressure, right? So if you lead a high fat, high sugar, high salt diet, you have the fat, which starts to clog your heart, you have the sugar, which starts to help you gain weight, and then you have the salt, which increases your blood pressure. And none of those are great for you. So you wanna make sure you're keeping 1, 2, or all 3 of those down, right? So where do we find salt in our diet? So a lot of the times we find it in our processed and our fast foods, right? So foods maybe we don't make ourselves from scratch. We don't find it in things like our fruits and our vegetables and our natural foods, things we would find on the My Plate. We don't find it in those. In fact, that's why we want you to eat fruits and vegetables. They're low or have low or no salt and mainly no sugar in them, right? Well, the fruits do, but that's natural sugar. So, and it comes with fiber, right? So we want to make sure we're looking for these low salt, low sugar, low fat alternatives. Now, where we talked about, we find them in a lot of our fast foods and our processed foods. So processed foods are things like this box dinner, maybe this processed rice, or even this processed rice, and our canned foods, right? So these mostly unlabeled products will kind of break down where we find the salt in those. So let's start by looking at our canned foods. So here I have 2 types of canned carrots, and they both have different amounts of salt, right? Salt is used as a preservative in our canned foods, so that's why they tend to be high in salt. Here we have these 2 cans. One is regular salt and one's no salt added. Both cans are 3.5 servings, so if we ate the whole can, we'd get all of the salt from the nutrition facts label, right? So in this case, this 3.5 cans and the regular one gives us 900 milligrams if we ate the whole can of salt, which is about half of the amount of salt we want in our day. If we get the no low sodium option, it's about 200 milligrams of salt if we ate the whole can. So think about that next time you go out. One of the easiest ways we can cut back on salt is getting no and low sodium options in our canned goods. You can find it in beans, in corns, in carrots, all of those. Because canned goods are cost effective. They're a great way to get vegetables at a low price, but we just want to watch out for salt. Now say I can't find this low sodium version. Oh no, it's gone. Ooh, that was loud. What you can do is rinse your canned goods. Rinsing your canned goods cuts the salt in half. So it would potentially take this 900 milligrams from a whole can of carrots and cut it down to about 400 milligrams, which isn't great, but it's way better, right? The next thing we're gonna talk about is these home meals, these pre-made meals. These pre-made meals can be great, and they're really quick, fast alternatives, and potentially some of them are healthy, right? You know, this comes with a lot of calcium. It comes with calcium in it and vitamin C in it, and it's lower in sugar, you know, but oh, it's low fat too. Look at that, some lower fat. But what we want to look at is the sodium, right? In fact, this meal has 30% of your sodium in just one small package. So keep that in mind. Some of these meals can be even higher than that. This one happens to only be 30, and if it's a whole meal and that's your meal replacement for the day, 33% in one meal, not that bad. But if you're just eating this as a snack, or if you're eating extra stuff with this, that's not a great plan. So watch out for sodium in prepackaged and processed foods. Let's get rid of that one. The last thing we want to talk about is the difference between flavored and unflavored products. So here I have a flavored product and an unflavored product. Which one do you think has more salt in it? The flavored or the unflavored? Well, I'm going to tell you the teriyaki style definitely has more salt. In fact, if we look at this label, there's 2 servings in this container, and each serving contains 900 milligrams of sodium. So one package of this rice is your whole daily value of sodium, right? You're only looking to get about 2,000 milligrams of sodium per day, and this got it for you, right? If we go with this unflavored multigrain medley, we're only looking at 200 milligrams per serving, right? So 400 milligrams in the whole package. That's so much lower. I mean, like, that's a fifth of the amount of salt than this flavored one. So maybe get these, if we're getting processed rice, maybe get the unflavored one. But another great alternative is getting regular rice and just cooking it yourself. You know, we don't always have the option. Sometimes we need these speedier options. But if you have the time, get regular white rice or regular brown rice and just cook it yourself. That way you can control the amount of salt. That's the big thing with all of these things. Fat, sugar, and salt, it's all about controlling it. It's about knowing how much is in your diet and knowing how much you're putting in it. So maybe get options without the salt, so then you can add as much as you want. I know sometimes people even add salt to the teriyaki rice in this. So just make sure you're kind of taking control. Take control of your salt, sugar, and fat. It's one of the best ways you can take control of your health. So how can I reduce my salt intake? There's a couple of different ways that you can do it right off the bat. One, getting natural foods, getting fruits and vegetables and regular rice in your diet and stuff like that, and adding the flavors yourself. Another way, instead of using salt, what about herbs and spices? Things like paprika and chili powders and cumin and parsley and cilantro, all of those don't have salt in them. They only get salt when we add salt. Even things like limes and lemons, right? It's a great way to make your own dressings or flavor your food. Do it yourself. That way you can control the amount of salt. Another thing is fresh and frozen vegetables instead of canned ones. Even though we found out how to cut down some of the salt, using fresh and frozen is a great way to avoid salt altogether. Our fresh vegetables don't have salt in them. And our frozen ones don't tend to either, because they preserve them by freezing them instead of by adding salt to them. So kind of keep that in mind. And if you are using those canned goods, rinse them and get rid of that liquid. That's where a lot of the salt lives. I want to thank you all for watching this video. It was great to have you if you came to all 6 of the series lessons. If you didn't see them all, they'll be on our webpage and you can find them at a later date. I really hope you learned something throughout this process, and I hope you take something home about fat, sugar, and salt. It's super important. If you attend one of the Philly or Reading farmers markets, mention this video the next time you go to the market and you'll get up to $4 in Burke's Farm Bucks or Philly Food Bucks to spend on fresh fruits and vegetables right there at the market. Thank you for coming, and we hope to see you at our next market.